Dwell Church. My name is Matt Stefan. I'm part of the leadership team here. And I don't know if you could hear the volume at which I was singing those Christmas carols, but I was thrilled out of my mind. It's December 7th, and I've already eaten what I think is too many Christmas cookies, but I decided today that I'm pleased with that. That's a great thing to do. Eat as many as you want, you guys. Feel no guilt. Feel no shame. There are passages in the Bible that describe Jesus' presence as sweet, and I am honoring that as I eat the Christmas cookies. I encourage you to do the same. Welcome to Dwell Church. We are a church plant built on 5 core values. We want to be Jesus-centered, research-based, trauma-informed, diverse, affirming, and inclusive. And we're exploring what a community of Jesus followers looks like, built on those things. But it's kind of simple. We're on a quest to build a church where anyone can take a step closer to Jesus. So even if you don't like Christmas carols, I hope that at some point in these 45 minutes, you feel the invitation to take a step deeper into your life with Jesus. Now, we have all kinds of people that come to Dwell. It's such a delight, but it could be that you've never been to church before in your life. And I am just so glad that we have people that are just brave enough to do that. It's a brave thing to visit a church. It's a brave thing to visit a church plant. If you are new in some capacity, we'd love for you to connect with us so that we can connect with you. Our mission is just to help people find their place in the universe, and maybe this could be that for you. Sure hope it is. If not, though, you can find out. We provide all kinds of good resources, reflections, opportunities to serve on this email list right here. And so if you're new, connect with us there. And then we hit a major milestone this year where we hit financial sustainability. That's very rare for a church plant of our age. Next year, 2026, we'll start our next fundraiser goal, which is to develop enough ongoing funds coming through that we can hire another staff person to run our kids and student ministries. I don't know if we're quite ready for that, so I'm not going to go any further into that. But if you would like to partner with Dwell, one of our goals is to have financial transparency in a way where you know exactly what your money is going towards. So if you become a financial partner of Dwell in the next 3 to 6 months, that's what you will be financing. Very exciting stuff. But grateful for you all. In just a few weeks here, we'll be celebrating Christmas together in this room on Friday, December 19th. An hour before, at 6 p.m., we'll be having a really delightful Christmas fest right there in the courtyard area. That's going to include, importantly, churros, which I'm very excited about. Also, a jazz trio and a bounce house and all kinds of things. It's really fun to connect deeply with this neighborhood here, and we invite them, we send them mailers, and they've tended to really show up, so it's going to be a delightful time. Now, I know it can be tricky to get off work and get here by 6 p.m., but I encourage you to find a way to enjoy that moment with some friends or family. Also, you might be sitting on one of these guys, which is a great way to invite a friend. Studies still show that even in a skeptical world like the one we live in, maybe rightly so, I tend to be a skeptic myself, that people will come to church on Christmas. So find someone who might be willing to step into this room and maybe experience what I've experienced, which is the light and guidance of Jesus. That's what this thing is for. And as I said, if nothing else, they'll get a churro. A couple of weeks ago, we did an experiment. We do this every Christmas and Easter, where during the service, we just get out our phones and we invite someone. It's really intimidating. And I have to think about what I'm going to say, and I have to think about how to get exactly the right tone, because some people are not very interested in receiving that kind of text message. So I wanted to share with you how that went for me. I got a buddy in my neighborhood, and I texted him, "Hey, I know you've been to church before, maybe you don't want to, but would you come with us on Christmas? There's going to be churros." And he said, "You're right, I have no interest in organized religion, but maybe for a churro I would consider it." And that's all we're looking for. And I hope what he experienced was that I was thinking of him. And maybe he'll come, maybe he won't. Hopefully there'll be enough people here. Well, you won't be able to pick him out if he does. But I hope that it is one small step for us becoming deeper friends, but also maybe for him, one small step of bringing that skepticism down just 1 degree. That's all we're looking for. A warm, thoughtful invitation. Wanted to share that with you. We're also in this series, as I've been talking about, called The Weary World Rejoices. And if I'm honest, the last month I have felt quite weary. We may have overdone it with our fall sports and travel schedule. Maybe you're feeling the same. In fact, the last month I felt like, how do I recharge this battery? Normally I'm a person who can just go. If I'm interested in it, I tend to have infinite energy. But then this last month I've been like, What is going on with my own personal battery? So just yesterday I was like, you know what, tomorrow, instead of getting up at 5 a.m. and reading or playing video games like I normally do, so I can have an hour to myself, what if one day I just don't set the alarm? So this morning I slept in till 7 a.m. It was amazing. And I feel incredible. It is okay to rest. But also, it is a reality that many people in our world experience weariness. And as I've sat down to write these talks, one temptation is to center the weariness that we share, that we connect over, that is a very real part of our lives. Instead, however, I have tried to really focus on centering this on the good news of Jesus that speaks to my own weariness. What does Jesus say to me when I am weary? And what might God have to say to you to get you to rejoice right in the midst of your own weariness? What would be the content of the message that God has for you that would make you say, oh, I'm rejoicing, even if at the same time I'm quite weary? So what we've been doing is taking a look at the first couple of passages in each of the Gospels. And last week we took a look at the Gospel of John, which we read again today. We'll do that each week because I find the word becoming human just to be such a profound concept. But then last week we also took a look at the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark is the shortest, it's the most energetic, it's the tersest of the four Gospels. And so it begins, for example, with this incomplete sentence, the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. That's it. And in the news today are people out in college who are getting F's on their paper. But if you read Mark, you would also say, hey man, get Grammarly. Get some better grammar here. This is an unhelpful, incomplete sentence. But it does score high in terms of it being the topic sentence of the gospel. You know exactly what is about to transpire. You are going to hear the good news of Jesus. And then it closes with this. Jesus said, go into all the world and preach the good news to all creation. You see, in Mark's mind, Jesus' message is not just for people. It is for all of the universe. And what was remarkable last week is we saw the impact over 2,000 years that the message of Jesus has had on our world. Sometimes it goes unregistered because it is so familiar to us. But all kinds of things that we take for granted, that we love, that we cherish, have been part of Jesus' intellectual heritage passed down to us. But what is remarkable about Jesus is not his impact. Of course he's impactful. If he was God, as the way he said he would, what else would we expect except for major impact on the planet Earth? What is remarkable about his ministry is his gentleness. That he is known for being quite gentle. And so it became part of the tradition that his followers sought to have the fruits of his Spirit, one of which was, quite importantly, gentleness. So that his follower, the prolific Apostle Paul, could say to his church in Thessalonica, I was among you as a nursemaid, nursing her own child. I was gentle to you as a mom nursing her baby. That was the image he thought of himself as the leader of that community. And so the weary world rejoices because the gentle king has arrived. What we are used to is competition and exploitation and violence and deceit. But when Jesus comes with his gentleness, we can all rejoice. And this is the message of the nativity of the Gospel of Mark. Today we'll talk about Matthew. And today we're talking about the depths to which Jesus is with us. And with, it seems to me, is the most Christmas word of them all. Because what does Christmas signify except that Jesus has come to us? And so in the stories about Jesus that start each gospel, what is emphasized there is that he has finally, truly, in the deepest ways imaginable, come to be with us. That is the story of the gospel. So as we reflect and meditate on that reality, a question for you, what story are you living? Every human alive is living a story. It's the lens through which they see the world. It's what animates their interior being and decision-making. And if someone is living a story, it sort of oozes from every pore. Psychologists call it your narrative identity. It's the story that you are living out. We've all been around somebody who is living a story of gratitude and of courage and maybe of joy. We've been around those people, we've worked with them, and we've thought, aren't you a bright ray of sunshine? You're my favorite coworker. You're living out this amazing story. We've also been around people who are living out a story of anger or of resentment or of bitterness. And sometimes I've been one of each. Sometimes Joy oozes from my pores, but sometimes resentment does. Depending on how I have engaged with the story that exists within me, depending on the narrative that I am working with, the story I am telling myself. The story that Jesus has for us, the story that the Bible invites us to live, is much different. It is the story of God being with us. And so the question that exists for you and me to chew on today is, what story do we want to live? Or even, what story might God want you to be living? We're taking a look at the Gospel of Matthew. And especially in the Gospel of Matthew, he is working hard to impress upon you and I the depths to which Jesus is with us. He is inviting us to live the story, not even of joy, hope, and gratitude. I think those are byproducts of living in close proximity to Jesus. So we'll explore together what it means for Jesus to be with us. But I want you, during the course of these 10 or 15 minutes, to be thinking about, what is the area of your own life where, gosh, when you're honest, you are hungry for the presence of Jesus there? What is the ache or the disappointment or the place where you have struggled and wrestled? What is the place you could open up just for a moment tonight to say, Jesus, would you visit this part of my life? As we explore the depths to which Jesus is with us. Matthew famously begins with everybody's favorite kind of Bible passage, a genealogy. It's a list of 46 names, all in a row. And it is a specific set of names designed to do a specific set of names, a specific thing, which is to tell a story. In the ancient world, your genealogy was like your resume, and you were maybe tweaking your genealogy, just like you would your resume, to convey a certain thing about your identity. And so what the Gospel of Matthew opens up with is a way of, in the genealogy sort of way, saying this is a story about this person's identity. So, for example, the first passage says this is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And David and Abraham, of course, important characters in the First Testament of the Bible, but specifically guys who screwed up royally, but still trusted God in the mess of their lives. That's what they're very famous for. And so what this genealogy is already telling us is that the story of Jesus is the story of the God who keeps his promises. That not even David's mistakes, not even Abraham's mistakes, could negate or subvert the promises of God. That is what the first verse of the Gospel of Matthew is about. And then it uncorks, as I said, 46 straight names that I can't even pronounce. And sometimes it's fun for a white guy like me to give you an anglicized version of all these names. I'm going to save you that today. What's really remarkable about this is the women in this genealogy. Now, it's not completely uncommon for women to be in genealogies. In fact, the longest genealogy in the Bible is that of Judith. And so it's not specifically the inclusion of women into this that is so powerful for us, but it is which particular women? Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Now, some of these are super deep cuts of stories in the Old Testament. You would have to really know your stuff as a person living in 2025, because there's at least 2 Tamars. So you really have to do some sniffing around to find out which is which. Luckily, I'm going to read to you a little bit from the book Light of the World, A Beginner's Guide to Advent by the feminist biblical scholar Amy Jill Levine. But let's talk about who these people are. The particular Tamar that is in this story is very famous. Her first 2 husbands have died. And then in the culture in the ancient world, it was the job of the other relatives to marry her. Because if you were an unmarried woman, you were outside of the social structure that would provide a home, food, income. And in the story of Tamar, her distant relative who's supposed to marry her refuses to do so. And this is a story about the importance of systems, of justice, of upholding your end of things in a societal sort of way. And so each of these women on this list, in their own way, is both determined to be very clever, but also righteous. In the story of Tamar, what she does is that she dresses up like a prostitute. And when her very distant relative goes to visit the prostitute, it turns out to be her. And then, while she's with this man, she steals some of his stuff. So that later, when she comes to him and said, do you remember that time you went to the prostitute? It was me, and now I'm pregnant with your child, and you have to, by law, marry me. And he said, how do I know that it was you? And then she shows him all the stuff that she stole. And so he was forced to decide, am I going to say, yes, I did go to a brothel and this person stole my stuff and I would like to prosecute them? Or am I going to do the right thing and marry this person that by law I was supposed to marry anyways? And so in this quite remarkable scene, the man, Judah, says to her, you were the righteous one. You understood the instruction of Yahweh and fulfilled them through this scheme, and I did not. And so the first woman mentioned in the New Testament is this extremely clever lady who takes matters into her own hands to cajole the man in question to do what they're supposed to do and to fulfill the law and instruction given to them by Yahweh. Now, some of these other stories you might be familiar with. Rahab, also a prostitute. Here, the soldiers of Israel are supposed to go look into the land of Canaan, the promised land, but instead they go to a prostitute. And instead of turning them away, she makes a deal with them that, will you care for my household if I help you? And in that too, she is remembered as quite righteous. Ruth, you might remember, is famous for expressing great loyalty to her sister-in-law, Naomi. And it's a deep story about women friendship and the faithfulness of what it means to be a righteous woman to one another. Finally, Bathsheba, who is remembered in Matthew chapter 1 as Uriah's wife. Here is the story of David's big screw-up, that David desired Bathsheba and so has her husband Uriah murdered. And what is remarkable about this is that, if nothing else, the Hebrew Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, are deeply committed to transparency. They share the dirty laundry of their leaders. And so David here is mentioned in some ways in an alluring sort of way, but also his sins are on the front page, the very first chapter of the New Testament, that it will always be remembered that there were other people who were involved. Now, these four women tell a certain kind of story that Amy Jewel Levine wants to help us internalize. So here is her summary. She writes, much can be said about these women. Matthew appears to be making at least 4 points. First, women too contribute importantly to salvation. So pay attention to the women, everyone. From the genealogy to Mary, the mother of Jesus, to Peter's mother-in-law, to the woman suffering in hemorrhages, to the woman at the feeding of the 5,000. In the book of Matthew, the story cannot proceed without women. Second, all 4 women in this genealogy are involved in unexpected and subversive sexual relationships in one way or another. They anticipate how Joseph's wife, the mother of Jesus, how Joseph learns that his betrothed is pregnant. Matthew is warning the readers, do not move to snap judgments when you hear stories of adultery or prostitution, for you do not know these people. You do not know the details of their lives. In fact, all of these women were declared righteous in their Old Testament stories, but also in the Gospel of Matthew. And righteousness, of course, is a key term for Matthew in terms of describing Jesus. The third is that these women represent various family structures. There is no predetermined format for people that God will use. Finally, Rahab is a Canaanite, Ruth is a Moabite, Uriah, Bathsheba's first husband, is a Hittite, and all show deep loyalty to Israel and to Israel's God. Matthew tells us through the genealogy that the birth of Jesus will be good news not only for the Jews, but also to everyone else alive. Everyone is part of the movement. The genealogy tells an inclusive story about what God is up to. And finally, the penultimate verse in Matthew's Gospel says that we are to share Jesus' news with all nations. This is a text that comes full circle. Everyone is included in the message of Jesus. And so the story that the genealogy is attempting to tell us about God being with us is that He is with every person who walks the earth. His presence is available to every single one of us. Now here in Matthew chapter 2, begins this way. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. And it's an iconic text, so I'm just going to straight up read it to you. Sometimes the church is good to read the Bible. Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they had lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But when he had resolved to do this, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, which means to save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet Isaiah. The virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And then Joseph awoke from his sleep and did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. Here we are exploring Jesus' name, Jesus the Emmanuel. Jesus means God is saving us. And Emmanuel means he is with us. The name himself of Jesus himself is telling the story that we are talking about. That his presence is what saves us. He is saving us by proximity to himself. He has come to us. In a moment, we're going to reflect on the depths to which he is with us and what it truly means in your life and in mine for Jesus to be with us. To be with us in the way that Emmanuel is attempting to capture. But for a moment, I want to invite you again to examine your own story, the story you are living. Where are the places where you feel the absence of Jesus? Where are the aches or the pains or the disappointments or the unresolved spots or the places where you feel lost, where if you could wave a wand, you would say, Jesus, you would be near to me in this part of my life? Because Christmas is the time where we celebrate that he promised to be with you there. And that maybe before you were willing to shine a light on that part of your life, he was even already at work there. But it is incumbent upon us to open up our hearts and minds and to open up our story and say, this is the place, Jesus, where I need you. Dwell Church intends to be a research-based church. What does that mean? I don't know. We're figuring it out together. One of the things it means is that we try to integrate psychology deeply into everything that we do. One of my favorite ways of doing that is by studying the experimental psychologist Richard Beck. His work's very formative for the way that I think about Jesus. And he writes about this beautiful piece of art, although it's not as beautiful once you know what it is. I'm going to read you a blog post that he put up that I think is maybe the best reflection about Christmas that I know of. As I do so, I want to invite you to think about what are the places in your life where you're hungry for Jesus' presence. Richard Beck, as I said, is an experimental psychologist, but he also volunteers to lead a prison Bible study, and so this is a reflection about certain kinds of human psychology and what it means and how he shared that with his buddies in the prison Bible study. Richard Beck wrote, last week, out of the prison Bible study, I led the inmates through an unlikely Advent meditation. Our focus was on the artwork called Piss Christ, which is a controversial photograph by the photographer Andre Serrano. In 1987, the photographer Andre Serrano unveiled his controversial work called Piss Christ. This was a photograph of a crucifix submerged in a mixture of blood and of urine. It broke into the public consciousness in 1989 when members of the U.S. Senate expressed outrage that Serrano had received $15,000 from the American National Endowment for the Arts. Senators called the work filth and blasphemous and abhorred it. One senator said, in naming it, Serrano was taunting the American people. He was seeking to create indignation. That is all right for him to be a jerk, but let him be a jerk on his own time with his own resources. Do not dishonor our Lord. Later in 1997, the National Gallery in Melbourne, Australia was closed when members of a Christian group attacked and damaged this photograph. Beyond the content of the photograph, what really offends is the name, the juxtaposition of the word piss with the word Christ. What is blasphemous is the contact between something holy and something defiling. We feel that the word piss contaminates the Christ. This is an example of the psychological attribution called negativity dominance in judgments of contamination. That is, when the pure comes in contact with the contaminant, the pure is what becomes polluted, rather than the other way around. The negative dominates over the positive. The power is not with the pure, but sits with the pollutant, like how a single hair in our food ruins the entire dish. This is why the Pharisees see Jesus becoming defiled when he eats with tax collectors and sinners. The pollutant, the tax collectors and sinners, defiles Jesus, the pure. The negative dominates over the positive. The pollutant is the stronger force. Thus, it never occurs to the Pharisees, because it is psychologically counterintuitive, that Jesus' presence might actually sanctify or purify those who he is eating with. Because pollutant psychology doesn't work that way. Thus, in the contact between the urine and Jesus in Piss Christ, we instinctively judge the negative to be stronger than the positive, thus the shock and the blasphemy and the reaction. But the real blasphemy might just be this, that we somehow think that the urine or the blood is stronger than Christ. That we instinctively and maybe blasphemously believe that the defilement of our lives is the strongest force in the universe, stronger even than God. It never occurs to us that Christ is stronger than the piss of our lives. I looked at the men in the Bible study and said, this is the scandal of the incarnation. This is the scandal of Christmas. That God descended into the piss and excrement and darknesses of your life. And the piss and excrement and darkness did not overcome him. I know, I told the men, that this is so very hard to believe. That Jesus goes into the darkest, most disgusting, most defiled corners of our lives. That all by itself is already hard to believe. But even harder to believe is that Jesus is stronger than that polluting, shameful, defiling darkness. That is Christmas. John chapter 1, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness had not overcome it. I have no idea what Serrano was trying to do with this bit of art. He was most likely trying to piss off Christians. If so, he succeeded. But the story of the incarnation is far more subversive than even the most subversive art. It is hard to be more transgressive than Christmas. Consider Beth Williams' analysis of this bit of art. What are we to make of it? What are we to understand by it? How can we interpret it? Aren't these our same problems with reading Jesus' stories? Most obviously, we are enraged by the combination of the iconic image of Christianity, the crucified Christ, with human bodily fluid, and people felt that this work set out deliberately to provoke viewers with outrage. The artist most certainly aimed to provoke a reaction, but what reaction? The fact that urine involved is also crucial here. But was the use of urine simply intended, as some of Serrano's detractors have claimed, to cause offense? Had the artist deliberately set out to show disrespect to this religious image by placing it in this way? Some felt it was tantamount to urinating on the crucifix. I, Richard Beck now writing again, would suggest that even if some viewers and commentators feel that this was the artist's intention to be offensive, there are also other ways to interpret it. The process of viewing the crucified Christ through the filter of the human body fluids requires the observer to consider all the ways that Christ, both as fully divine and fully human, really shared in the base physicality of my human life. As a real human being, Christ took on all the characteristics of the human body, fluids, excretions, all of it. He was with us. To think that urine can therefore force the viewer to be offended by this or to contaminate the Christ means that we have failed to think what it meant for Jesus to be fully human. God had a body, and that is what connects him to you and I. That is about as transgressive as it can get. So transgressive, in fact, that many Christians now and through history have passionately resisted and banished the thought. It's the same impulse that will cause many to denounce this art and maybe this post. Christmas is so hard to believe that most Christians don't believe it. The Word became flesh, God dwelt among us, and still does, even in the piss, especially in the piss. This is God with us. There is a depth to which Jesus knows you, that he is not offended. He is not alarmed or shocked by whatever it is it might be. And this is the good news, that even in that place of your life, there is Jesus' radiating and transformative presence. So here, in a minute, I'm going to pray for you. And then I'm going to give you 1 minute to invite Jesus deeper, to shine his light in the darkest corners of your existence, to radiate that light in your story, so that you can say, Jesus, whatever my story is, would you shine through it? Then we'll continue on. Jesus, thank you that you keep coming to us. Lord, that it is with gentleness, that it is with grace, that you keep pursuing us. So God, we lift up the things that maybe no one knows about us, or maybe the things that everyone knows. God, would you give us the wisdom and the courage to open up those hidden chambers of our heart and to let you dwell there too. God, I'm grateful in my own life. When I finally worked up the courage to be honest about myself, that what I found, 'Cause that you were already working. in that bit of my heart, in that portion of my story. And God, most of all, would you give us the courage to understand and to grasp the meaning of Christmas, the depth to which you are with us. Together, Lord, we say that we love you and we offer our lives to you.